Now, right here on set, joining me is great friend Vivek Ramaswamy, businessman and author of Truths, The Future of America First, host of the brand new series, Truths with Vivek Ramaswamy, streaming now exclusively on Fox Nation. Thank you, Vivek. Hold the book up. It's good stuff. We're going to get full complement of marketing and advertising. I have a couple things I want to talk to you about in terms of your new series. But I'm reading... Kamala is calling for an end to the filibuster. Just something that annoys me, so I'm going to bring it up. It may appear in your Fox Nation series. Kamala is calling for an end to the filibuster regarding abortion. Yep. Okay, which I think is, first of all, ending the filibuster is a bad idea. Second of all, I thought the Supreme Court decision turning it back to the states was a good idea. This would end that. But third of all, she's fronting for a packing of the Supreme Court, and that's just the worst of all.
That's where this road ends. Yeah. And the reality is, you actually do talk about where Kamala wanted to end the filibuster first was to actually ram the Green New Deal through. People say that she just spoke in favor of the Green New Deal. Not quite. She was a co-sponsor of the legislation, and she says she favors ending the filibuster to do it. Now you're seeing it in the question of abortion. This is one of the things I talk about in the book is our Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedom in human history. You go to the direction of packing the Supreme Court, that's the end of the country as we know it, because that is the last bastion protecting this country from the governmental overreach. Look at those three-letter agencies. One of the things that's staggering, Larry, is how many times three-letter agencies like the FTC, like the SEC, countless of them, have lost, the EPA as well, have lost in federal court, saying that their own actions are unlawful.
Right.
So if you pack the Supreme Court, you lose the last bastion protecting this country. There's a whole chapter in this book dedicated to that and the way the Supreme Court has pushed back on the administrative state. That, I think, could be the most dangerous part of a Harris presidency that nobody's actually talking about.
And part of the administrative state, with or without legislation, I mean, these bureaucracies, the HHS is probably the worst one, but it's not the only one. We've talked about this. The swamp and the nanny state that comes from the swamp. Let's just spend a moment on the nanny state, because it would be a good thing if the government was promoting work, not paying for not work.
Exactly.
And if government was more sensible with respect to a private-oriented healthcare system instead of a government takeover of the healthcare system. And I could go on, and you know this full well. But the nannies, are you getting to the nanny state in the book and also the TV series?
I actually get to the nanny state in the very start of this book, starting with the prologue.
Good.
And the book is called Truths for a reason. It's not just about speaking hard truths to the left. It's about speaking hard truths to our own camp and our own party as well. I don't think conservatives have gone hard enough after the nanny state. What is the nanny state? It's the entitlement state and the regulatory state. You want to fix nearly every major problem in this country. You want to know how to do it. Shut down and dismantle that nanny state. For example, in this book, I make the argument that immigration, we would not have an immigration crisis in this country if we did not actually have a nanny state. We would not have a national debt crisis in this country if we didn't have that nanny state. We wouldn't have this victimhood culture and the loss of cultural pride and hard work and loss of hard work in our country if we didn't have a nanny state. So many people, I think there are some emerging voices on the right that would prefer to replace the left-wing nanny state with a right-wing nanny state. No. The right answer is shut it down. 3 words. That's probably some of the most important parts of this book. If I had to summarize the important chapter on the administrative state, the fourth branch, the regulatory state, 3 words, shut it down. That's how we save a country. And so these are hard words, not just to the left. That's most of what this book is. But some of this contains some bitter medicine for the modern right as well. Both are required to save the country.
I've always said work is godly. And I know you have some God in this book, or higher power, as our founders put it into the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And I'd just like to spend a moment with you about that, the importance of a higher power. I'm not saying an established state religion. We are free to choose what religion. We are free to choose our understanding about God. But I don't see how a great country can have families and businesses and people working hard if they don't understand the moral values attached to a higher power, attached to God.
And some of this is actually linked to things like the climate agenda emerging. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. There's an old saying, it comes from Blaise Pascal, who I quote in this book.
Yes.
It's 400 years ago, scientist, great success, chemist and otherwise. He said, if there's a hole the size of God in your heart and God doesn't fill it, something else will instead. Right? We as human beings, we have an innate need to bend the knee to something. So if it's not going to be to the real thing, you're going to bend the knee to the climate religion, to the transgender religion. That's part of what we're seeing in this country is people are substituting faith in God, belief in country, belief in family. When those things disappear, they start bending the knee to new ideologies instead. But the most dangerous religions of all, Larry, are the ones that people fail to recognize as a religion when they're actually practicing it. So part of the case I make in this book, like you say, is for religious freedom. And that means the freedom not to believe. It's the beauty of America.
Yes.
But culturally speaking, our founders always viewed us as a country guided by the hand of divine providence. One nation under God, we say, for a reason. And one of the things I talk about in this book is the practical importance of that. Would we be more united as a country? Would we have individuals, especially in the next generation, who are more industrious, believe in their duty to work hard for a higher purpose? Yes, we would. And I don't think in the country right now the risk we see is we're not seeing the persecution of atheist minorities. To the contrary, we're seeing an assault on actual
100%
religion itself.
Look what you just said, duty, higher purpose. Those values, those words now are banned in many parts of, I'll just say, the other side of the aisle. I mean, they just are. You know, I said before when we were off set, off camera, I worked years ago for William F. Buckley at National Review. I was a senior editor there for a while, and he always said, a society that has no religion, or families that have no religious understanding, or work that has no religious backdrop is just not going to be worth it. We will deteriorate. And my fear is that people are afraid to speak out. And I'm glad you're speaking out. I think it's essential that you're speaking out. People might not have expected you to, but here you are, and I love it. I love every moment of it. I got to get out. But no, really, I want to have this conversation.
Well, tell me what you think of the book, Larry.
Put the book up.
We'll end up talking about, challenges some conventional wisdom, but the truth of the matter is we need to do more of that in this country. And I hope it arms everyday Americans who might agree with you and me to go convince their own friends on the left of the same thing. That's what we need in the country.
That's great stuff.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, Barron.